I had done a video prior about this very topic, but I thought I would update it a bit, a slightly different perspective to think about it really in terms of work and labor, measuring silver for a day's wage. So let's explore as we go through this again, but a slightly more updated and different viewpoint. Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Silver as a measure of a day's wage. Let's explore this metal as has been used to pay for wages for a day's worth of work throughout the millennia. And we're going to find out what people thought of silver in terms of its value for a day's worth of work in the ancient past, and in recent history, and today, and in the future. Silver is one of those metals that has been seen as a store of value, as a currency, and as money for millennia. We first saw it alloyed naturally with gold, and the Lydians took note of this and pressed coins out of them around 700 BC. Once they found a way to separate the metals, harness the pure metals of gold and silver, silver was the main metal to be used to pay for wages and as currency to be used to exchange for goods and services. But when you think of silver as a measure of wealth for work that you do in labor, well, I think it gives you a whole new understanding of the metal. Most of us are familiar with this, as we are all paid a day's wages, and typically that makes its formation the term of the fiat currencies in the nations from which we reside. That is our value of for our work in fiat currencies. Now, when most of us make purchases from our hard-earned money for silver, for our stacks, or for collecting, well, we can translate that very easily here today. But let's take a look at the past. The past does not always indicate the future performance, and I think this holds very true for silver indeed. From the times of the ancients, when silver was used by different kingdoms and organizations and empires, well, silver was quite valuable and used in a myriad of different ways for payments. And in some cultures, like in the Egyptian culture, it was considered more precious than gold. It was very hard to find in those areas. So silver was seen as an extremely valuable metal during those times. Move ahead, we find the famous Roman Empire that used the denarius to pay its soldiers for a good, hard 12-hour day of work for their soldiers, and they were paid in the denarius, and this represented a hard day's wager. Yes, indeed, a lot of work to be able to get this one coin right here. And at that time, well, silver was still very hard to come by, but it was used in transactions and it provided a great value and was coveted for such hard work in that day. So there you have it. Silver was used, and some people believe in many cases that use that comparison for even today's wages, or in more recent history, what could be represented, as is the case with this dime. The mercury dime contained almost as much silver as we saw in the denarius, and so some people make that connection that perhaps even as the history moved out, throughout we saw silver was being highly sought after. In the United States, there was even a thought to add a silver standard along with the gold standard, the bimetallic standard, as the Constitution did call for gold and silver to be used as money. How did that really work out and to how much silver was being mined at the time to be made available for use as that currency, to be able to pay people in these coins made of silver. But really, in the 1800s and the 1900s, we saw a vast increase in mining of silver. And technologies had improved, and along with gold mining that was done, especially with the gold rush of 1849, and as well, we started to see more silver mining out in the western portion of the United States and continued into the South American. The Silver Mountain, in Peru and the like, and Mexican silver was being produced at a great measure. Both gold and silver increased, and people were in demand for the metals as well. But nonetheless, because of the increase in supply, the value and the worth of them became a little bit less as it increased to a point where it almost increased beyond the demand of the population in some aspects. As time moved on, we come to realize that after the Roman Empire fell and before, we saw things like the modern day, we saw debasement of the currency. We see debasement of the currency, taking the precious metals out, sometimes slowly at a time. Well, then you see that really the population was only getting what was referred to as the ghost of money, because it was using base metals to replace the precious metals contained therein. And we've seen this here recently in the United States of America with the debasement of our everyday coinage to where now the dime contains no silver at all. And that was done in just one short year. The only coin here in the United States to contain silver was the $50, and those circulated infrequently compared to the quarter and the dime. As we move forward through history, even beyond modern history, we're finding more increased usage of silver being used for other portions, for other uses, for other technologies in the biomedical fields and the like since the debasement. And so the demand for silver in terms of commerce greatly decreased. There was a time when you would consider, the amount of silver contained in the time when the dollar was stronger, and that silver being used was measured by what was on the face value of the coin, in this case, the dime. But with the silver out of our money, and with silver increasing and being used for other purposes other than currency, how do you measure a day's wage? Back then, in the 50s and 60s, well, you could probably, get a day's wage based off of, the amount of income at the time, and it could be a certain allotment of silver coins to pay for a day's wage. But fast forward to now, what about the present? Well, if you were to take your fiat currencies and exchange them for silver, it would be a day's wage would be essentially worth more than this 1 ounce coin plus this half ounce coin. And on an average wage in the United States would equal to almost this much silver. Now keep in mind that average wage is about $25, and so we're going to add a little bit more silver to it to give you sort of a representation, because boy, $25 doesn't seem like a lot for a day's worth of labor, but when you take in the average of the ultra poor to the ultra rich and mean it together, that's about what you get. That's a lot of silver compared to this for a day's worth of labor. There you have it. I think it's quite interesting and fascinating that in time we're probably going to see it move in this direction. As currency gets debased, more silver could possibly even be discovered. It could move this way, or it could move the other way. There may come a point in time where if we reach peak silver mining, where it can move back down to this, and as currency goes up, who knows, this could be $30 a day, and this could be $30 an ounce. It wasn't that long ago where you did see where it would take less than 1 ounce of silver to equal a day's wage. But I think when you think about it, that, at most, take a look at your earnings and what you would consider to be a day's wage, and add up those ounces or whatever. Let's say it's 3 ounces or whatever, 4 ounces or 2 ounces of silver, or all the silver lined up here. What is your day's wage? And compare that to silver, and pile it up, and take a look at it, and measure it, and explore it in terms of its value for you personally. And I think that will give you a whole new outlook on silver and what it's worth for a day's wage. And I think that just goes to show you that this little amount of metal that you see before you could potentially represent a day's worth of work for you, 8 hours or what have you. And that gives you some insight on how really valuable silver is, even though it takes a lot more of it to measure a day's hard work than it did in ancient times, because there was a lot less of it around then. So take that into consideration as you continue to accumulate more silver for your collection or for your stack, as a means to preserve your wealth, where the dollar is losing value every year by at least a factor of 2%. So there you have it. Post your thoughts below. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.